This business meeting of the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District will come to order. Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Here.
Mr. Briggs?
Here.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. LeBron?
Here.
Dr. Sridhar? Mrs. Welch-Howe? There are 4 members present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. I would ask everyone who wishes to rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the board work session of October 8th, 2024.
So move.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. As we begin our meeting, I want to take the opportunity to remind everyone that in June, our board unanimously voted to place issue 49, the school district's operating levy and bond issue, on the ballot for the November 5th general election. Early voting is already underway by in-person voting at the Board of Elections through Sunday, November 3rd, and by absentee ballot, which can be mailed to or dropped off at the Board of Elections. On Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th, the polls will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Again, this year, many of our schools will be serving as Election Day polling places, including here at John Adams. We urge everyone to get out and vote in this important election. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Warren Morgan for this evening's CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Ellicott. Well, good evening, everyone, and we are already at our October business meeting. So that means the year is progressing. We are in the second quarter, and so the year is well underway. Also want to welcome back all of our scholars that are in our many of our year-round schools who just came back from fall break. This is their first week back. So many things that are taking place. And for our CEO update today and report, we have a couple of presentations that we just want to give some updates based on information that have even been brought up to the board before or just questions that we've been getting. But first, I'm very pleased to bring up Bob Gorman and his team from our school nutrition department. I know they've been well underway just with a lot of feedback that we got last year. Many of the things that we heard from the Listen and Learn tour last year was around our food and nutrition department, and I know his team, based on feedback that they received from students and also just other feedback that they've been gathering, have been making some updates. So I introduce Bob Gorman to you, and then hopefully on your way in, you got a chance to have, I know I had some of the tomatoes as a vegetarian, had some of those, and they were really good. So I wanted to make sure that everyone got a chance to get some of the items from our food service department. But Bob Gorman.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, school board, and distinguished guests. Again, I'm Bob Gorman. I'm Executive Director of School Nutrition here for CMSD. I'm joined today by Rebecca Rodriguez, our Farm to School Manager. So we wanted to talk to you today about our Farm to School program, which, since it's Farm to School Month, we wanted to give you a rundown about what it is and what we're doing. So the simple way to explain it is, Farm to School is simply teaching kids how to eat healthy, all right? The best way to explain it is like with the Sun Golds today. So when y'all came in, hopefully you tried the Sun Golds. There's 4 basic pieces of Farm to School. There's school gardens, local procurement, experiential education, and food and ag curriculum. Imagine this, with Sun Gold tomatoes, when we give students the opportunity to plant a seed, nurture that plant, harvest that Sun Gold tomato, more than likely they're going to try that Sun Gold tomato and like it. When I then procure local tomatoes, bring them into the cafeterias, serve them on fruit and vegetable bars, they're then making another connection with those Sun Gold tomatoes. They're more than likely to try them and again like them. And then with that, I'm bringing in that experiential education. Since I'm procuring those tomatoes locally, I'm bringing in local farmers or bringing those scholars to their farms with farm visits. They're making another connection with those Sun Gold tomatoes. They're again making another connection with where their food is coming from. They're more likely to try it and like it. Becky's going to talk to you again about food and ag curriculum, but when all four of these pieces come together, that's when the magic really happens. That's when we're really changing the way students eat. That's when we're really having an impact in the child's nutrition. And these healthy habits is what really is going to change that child's life, not only when he's with CMSD, but through his lifetime. So we purchase local foods for many reasons. It supports the local economy, environmental benefits, community engagement. But just like many reasons why we go to farmers markets, local foods taste better. And when foods taste better, kids are more likely to eat it. We're bringing the farmers markets to the schools. So when we first got here, we were spending roughly just under $100,000 in local purchasing. Basically, it was just apples. The last year, we spent $350,000. We upped it to many different types of apple varieties. We started bringing in local peaches, watermelon, started bringing in many different varieties of sweet peppers and Sun Gold tomatoes, but also breakfast bars that you tried. And then this year, we started working with hyper-local farms within the city of Cleveland. I'm going to turn it over to Becky, where she's going to talk to you about our Food Corps program.
So introduced this year is our Food Corps program, and really tying all of those things together that Bob had just mentioned. So a big part of their time is the classroom and community engagement, the hydroponic flex farm growing project, the fresh fruit and vegetable snack program, and their cafeteria time. So what is Food Corps? They partner with schools and communities to their goal by 2030, every child has access to a nourishing meal, so every child can experience the joy and power of food. They were currently in 17 states, but CMSD was the first to bring them into Ohio, so they added an 18th state to their list. So that was a very good partnership that we were really excited to bring on with them. So a big part of their time is with the classroom engagement through our educational philosophies of belonging, making sure the student feels they have a sense of belonging in the classroom and the space that they are in. Their sense of agency, they do have a voice and the power to have an impact on their food system. If they're growing the food and that is being put on the fruit and vegetable bar, they had an impact on their school community and they are feeding their school and they have a voice in that. And then with the sense of mastery, that they are mastering the skills that we are trying to teach them. And then so it is curriculum supported with next generation science standards and our community and family engagement through social media, community events, family nights, community outreach, education, all of that is top priority. So with the hydroponic flex farm project, again, the students are growing the lettuce, they're growing the basil and the herbs, and they're providing for their school and their community, but it's also that kinesthetic learning, that visual learning, and that science of growing, the art of creating, and the pride and power of impact that they are having on their schools. So the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Snack Program is in K-8. It's a twice per week program that encourages healthier snacking options. It exposes the child to new items that they might have never tried before. And it keeps an exposure and an encouragement and an excitement for some new foods. So their cafeteria time, kind of like a taste test that you all experienced walking in, trying new things, encouraging them. We gather feedback of if they liked it or not, but it's just that presence and that encouragement over and over. So please follow us at CMSD Nutrition on Instagram if you haven't already. Where you'll see department updates and changes and stay in the know of everything going on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team. And speaking of the hydroponics, I know we recently had Congresswoman Chantel Brown as well as Councilman Starr at, I believe it was Dyke Elementary School, doing the hydroponics program, and I saw some of the pictures, so just great work. And yeah, I know we have continued work to do to really make sure this gets spread across our schools. We're still not nearly in all the schools, but just to see the efforts that we're making, and also kudos to the partnership with the BIPOC farmers as well. So,
Thank you.
and if you have the clicker. Thank you very much. All right, the next update that I want to give for our CEO update today is really around our attendance. One of the things we've been doing as a team has really been focusing on our core measures. You may remember from last school year, there were updates we gave regularly aligned to our core measures on different areas of our goals and focus areas for the district. Our core measures are our North Star. Many of our core measures, all of our core measures can be tracked back to our state report card, and a lot of the strategy work we're doing is to really make sure that there's intentionality around supporting the instructional core and supporting the work that's taking place at schools. Today, I want to focus in on some work we've been doing around attendance. And one of the areas we've been focusing in on for attendance has just been on how we can support schools, particularly our Tier 3 schools that have been struggling with attendance. A new strategy we've been using this year are facilitated data reviews. So beyond the work that we're doing with the core measures, the goals, and the focus areas that we've been doing, we really want to make sure that the work we're doing at central office is meeting the schools and that we are all part of this work. So it's not just looking at the work that the schools are not doing. It's not looking at the areas where the schools may be falling short. It's really asking ourselves as a senior leadership team and a central office staff, what can we do to support our schools? And so our first facilitated data review was attendance, and Victoria Harris, who I don't know if is here tonight, who leads our attendance department, boldly stepped in and modeled this process as we move throughout. So a couple of things I want to highlight these are just our core measures, just reminding you of the areas that we've been focusing in on. They're under 4 big buckets for our core measures. One is on college and career readiness and measures. The other one is around our achievement measures. The third one is around our culture indicators, of which our attendance percentage is a goal that we have under our core measures. And then finally, our equity measures, which span throughout, just thinking about how we're closing gaps and supporting all of our students. So this is our dashboard. We have a dashboard now that we monitor at central office, but also in schools. So all of the schools, they have their dashboards. All their AAP goals are aligned in there. And there's alignment from the work that we're doing from the core measure level at the central office down to the schools. So every school also has their goals populated in there. And we can also see the progress that we're doing. And so this was a snapshot from when we were actually, this is the most recent snapshot that we have of one of our dashboard areas that shows our attendance from October through October 17th of 2024. With this dashboard, you can see the current progress. You can actually see it by grade level. You can see the attendance areas by grade level. You can see the tiers. So the Tier 3, those are the students that need the most support. And you can also see the other tiers in terms of where students are. Tier 1 is also broken up into different areas of support that we would need for students. The other thing I would show about the dashboard is you can see where we were based on last year. So when we did our facilitated data review as a leadership team in September, we saw that week we were actually lagging where we were last week. And so the question became, not only what our school is not doing, why do we have this gap, but what can we do to support that from the central office perspective. And so we did our facilitated data review process, and these were some things that were some headlines based on what we've done now. So actually from when we did the facilitated data review at the end of September to where we are now, actually there's been an uptick in attendance, and there's actually no change right now from where we were last year. It's good that we're not progressing, going backwards, but it's not where our goals are. We have goals to really make sure that we're surpassing where we were last year. And the other thing I tell our team is, for our urban district, we're behind where other urban districts are, particularly at the elementary level. So when you're seeing attendance percentages in the 80s percentage points, That's behind where other urbans are. And so we want to make sure we're getting at the 90%. And even with 90%, I've shared this before, students can still be chronically absent. All it takes is for a student to be missing 10% of the year and to be chronically absent. So these are areas we want to continue to focus in on. There are some strategies and some interventions that we've been doing to really focus in on some specific targeted groups. One of them being our freshmen. The other one being our Tier 3 schools, but as I tell our team, I believe there are 50 schools in our Tier 3 bucket. So when that's the majority of your schools, that becomes your Tier 1. It becomes your main focus that we're doing, and many of our schools are in that category of needing some intensive support around the chronic absenteeism. We've also been doing some work around the allocation of the support for the attendance liaisons, data fidelity implementation at the schools, making sure that there is appropriate attendance taking measures, that all of the processes are being followed, and then also just really making sure that there's alignment between the strategy of the inputs we're looking at and the outcomes, and not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. So we've been focusing in on that. There's also been other departments that have been leaning in to say where they're going to lean in and support. So our REA department, Research, Evaluation, and Accountability, to really study some more about the trends of attendance. For students that are missing attendance, is it a pattern in how they're missing attendance? Are there other reasons why they're missing attendance or missing days? These are areas that I know our REA department is willing to partner with our attendance department. Also with transportation, we received a lot of calls at the start of this year. We also received data through our Let's Talk portal, which is one of the things that we get for feedback from the community to know that there were some glitches in transportation this year, and that has impacts. It has impacts at the schools. It has impacts in terms of attendance. If kids were not picked up on time or they're not there, that has caused issues. So there are some things we wanted to study around that to make sure we can fix those and improve them. And then also, just with our network leaders, they have the most close contact with our schools. They support our principals, really working with the principals in the schools on those strategies and those AAP strategies. So this is an example of one of the facilitated data reviews on one area. We still intend to give those presentations like we did last year, just sharing where we are holistically on our core measures and our achievement. We just wrapped up our first round of NWEA, so we'll be looking at that data soon to also just see where we are as the year is progressing. And then also with the quarter just ending, we just got our first analysis of grades for this year and doing some analysis on that. So that is where we are and some highlights of our data. I'll move on to the next piece, and then at the end, Chair Al-Akkad, if there's any questions that board members have, we could take them. So we'll move on to the next piece. One thing before I bring up Dr. D'Amico to talk about our calendar. Last year, when we were looking at our state deficit reduction plan, one of the strategies that was brought up was around our school calendar and looking at days, and we received a lot of feedback on that. There were a lot of people both in the district and external to the district that says, hey, you need to look at this. There are different things we want to look at, and there are different things we want to measure. Our board asked us to really make sure that we were looking at this and doing a research study around some areas before making any decisions. Last year was purely financial. There were some trends we could see based on academic performance, but we wanted to do our due diligence and follow back up. And so with that, I know Dr. Sridhar was the one that asked that question, and he'll get this information as well. But we're here to provide not a decision point on where we are with that, but the methodology we're using and also the organization we're working with to help us do some of the studies. So with that, I bring up Dr. D'Amico to talk us through this. He can also grab the clicker.
Good evening. I'm also joined by Professor Adam Voigt, who's the Director of Urban Education at Cleveland State. Center for Urban Education at Cleveland State University. So some context about what we're talking about. So as Dr. Morgan shared, so the district currently operates many different calendars with varying amounts of additional instructional minutes for students and teachers. And we don't have a very good understanding of how these different calendars really affect student outcomes. We've presented some summary data That data was admittedly, big, averages, comparing categories, didn't really deal with some of the biggest methodological challenges with understanding how various calendars affect outcomes, because there's all sorts of things that change between schools besides calendars. So to really understand how the calendar itself, if we were to isolate just the calendar, is having an effect on our student outcomes, there's a certain level of methodological rigor we really need to be sure that we're applying to answer this question appropriately to give the board the information it needs. So when we've thought about how do we make sure that we are really approaching this project from the right frame with the right level of rigor, we identified the Cleveland Alliance for Education Research as a partner to help us design and execute a rigorous and impartial analysis of school calendars. I'm going to pass it to Adam here, one of the founding members of CARE, who can explain a little bit more of what CARE exactly is.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening, everybody. I haven't been to a board meeting in a while, so I'm excited to rejoin you all. So like Nick said, I direct the Center for Urban Education at Cleveland State, and I'm here mostly tonight just to provide some context for the research practice partnership that Cleveland State and CMSD and a third institution, the American Institutes for Research, have been engaged in for 7 years now. And it's through this partnership that we intend to execute this study that Nick's going to provide a little bit more detail on in a moment. So as an education researcher, my main goal professionally is to try to do research that improves outcomes for students in K-12 schools. But the reality is that most of the research that we conduct as academics never ends up in the hands of people who are in a position to do anything about it. It often gets published in a journal, and that's kind of the end of the story. And that disconnect is referred to in the education research literature as the research practice gap. So in an effort to try to overcome that gap, a new phenomenon referred to as research practice partnerships has arisen in the past decade or two that in theory involves education agencies like CMSD and research institutions like CSU and AIR sitting around the table together from the very beginning, from the conceptualization of a research study, to ensure that the right questions are being asked, the right voices are being heard, and that the evidence that's being produced is being produced and disseminated in a way that's actionable and relevant. So another characteristic of RPPs like CARE is that they're intended to be long-term, and we've been at this work now for 7 years. I've been the main point of contact at CSU for the duration of that engagement, and I'd like to believe, even though that some faces change in different positions in our institutions over time, that we've established a rapport of trust and a history of work that is helpful for the district. So that's what RPPs are, that's what CARE is supposed to do, and it's through this mechanism that we're planning to execute the proposed study. So CARE's work is exclusively grant funded, so we've been successful in securing a lot of federal funding, foundation funding, to conduct a number of studies over the course of our 7-year lifespan. And that's been helpful for the district because it hasn't really required them to expend any of their institutional resources on the work that we do. So I'm the main representative from Cleveland State. Our partner, Elizabeth Davis, is the main researcher from AIR, and Nick, in his role as Executive Director of Research and Evaluation and Accountability at CMSD, is the main CMSD partner. And the three of us make up what we refer to as the Executive Committee for CARE. So I'm going to just talk briefly about some of the projects that we've done in the past and then turn it back over to Nick to explain the proposed methodology for the current study. So one of the first projects that we worked on together as a partnership was supported by the U.S. Department of Education, Institute of Education Sciences, and the question that we sought to answer is, how does the climate of CMSD schools predict student education outcomes? And so we drew from your excellent longitudinal CFL data set to try to answer that question, and spent a couple of years in partnership primarily with the HumanWare team at that time to do that study. We also did interviews with students and staff in CMSD schools to get a better sense for how climate felt on a more personal level and how people felt about some of the various initiatives that were being implemented at the time to improve school climate. Another project that we've worked on as a partnership is the Cleveland Partnership for English Learner Success. Jose Gonzalez, who's here, was one of the practice partners on that project, and Dr. Davis from AIR was the PI. And this was also funded by the Institute of Education Sciences from the U.S. Department of Ed. And the goal of this project was to better understand what the needs were for English learners in the district. And the results of that study were helpful in the district formulating some new supports for that population of students. A project that's just wrapping up now, also funded by the Institute of Education Sciences from the U.S. Department of Ed. We've been successful in getting some grant funding from that highly competitive source of research funding support. It's called Project High Key. This has been a 5-year study, and it's a development study, meaning we've devoted a lot of time to trying to come up with a new innovation, a new program, working with CMSD's teachers and students. And it's something that I'm really excited about. We've been engaging teachers and students in what's referred to as youth participatory action research, youth-led action research on issues that youth name and identify in their schools that they'd like to affect change in, that they then research, conduct an original research on through survey, data collection, interviews, and they use what they learn from their research on an issue that they care about in their schools that they want to change to then come up with recommendations or advocate for changes on the part of leaders in their building. And one of the unique features of our approach through Project High Key has been that we're trying to integrate this YPAR, Youth Participatory Action Research process, into high school classes in creative ways. So we've worked with a math teacher who's figured out ways to have students collect their own data from surveys that they create on an issue that they care about to serve as the data to illustrate math concepts in a pre-calculus course, for example. We've had English teachers who have had students do background research and reading on the issue that they researched through the YPAR process in English classes, and lots of other really creative applications. And we've created a website that's intended to be shared nationally to kind of promote this strategy based on what we've learned here. A couple of other quick ones. We have a project Elevate, which is funded by a National Professional Development Program grant, again, to help the English learner population by increasing the number of TESOL certified staff in classrooms and empowering staff to help EL students strengthen their academic skills. And Dr. Davis from AIR has been the lead on that. And then recently, we just concluded a 2-year grant that was funded by the Hewlett Foundation to evaluate CMSD's, one of your main responses to the COVID pandemic, that being the summer learning experience, to see how it was working. And we conducted our first evaluation after the first year of implementation, and what we learned, I think, made some helpful contributions to how it was structured the second go-around. So that's just a kind of sampling of some of the work that we've done as an alliance, and like Nick said, it's through that alliance that we plan to execute the present study.
And the only other thing I'll add is the pictures in the last 2 slides were from the for the High Key YPAR project, the Youth Participatory Action Research. Those were pictures of students at the conference where they actually present their work to then people at CSU and other members of the public to actually share the results of their work. Oh, great. So yes, developing a research plan. So like Adam said, part of the key thing about CARE is actually getting the researchers in the room from the conception of the project. So it's actually working in collaboration with academics to develop what are the key research questions that are going to guide our inquiry into school calendars. And we've grouped these into some thematic categories. So related to student achievement, we have a question about how do students with additional school time perform on state tests compared to similar students without additional school time. Related to engagement, we're asking, does engagement differ between students and staff at schools with additional time and students and staff at schools without that additional time? Related to culture, we're asking, how does the climate at schools with additional time compare to those without additional time? And what do students, parents, and staff think of the different school calendars? Related to costs, so actually asking what are the monetary costs and or savings that could be accrued by eliminating extended days or years. So, and then what is the cost of any potential benefits found for the student outcomes related to achievement, culture, or engagement? So if we find any benefits there, essentially what would be a monetary value you would place on those benefits that we're getting? And then finally, a question of equity. So do students enrolling in schools with additional time differ from students enrolling in schools without additional time? So really thinking about all of our different racial ethnic subgroups, our special education, our students with disabilities, our English language learners, all of those different subgroups of kids, are they all getting similar opportunities, or is it certain groups of kids are only getting these opportunities? So these are the questions we're going to be focused on with our project. In terms of our methods, we're proposing a mixed method study that's going to include both quantitative data and quantitative, like student outcome data, and also quantitative and qualitative data collected via surveys and focus groups. So that mixed methods is the idea of it's both quantitative and qualitative. In terms of the quantitative methods, we're going to include both descriptive statistics and also do what's called a mixed effects model with statistical matching of covariates. So this is really this idea, if you think about this picture here of you've got students who might be in a school with extended time or a year-round calendar or some unique calendar. You've got students who are in a traditional calendar. So it's not just straight up comparing those schools, it's actually trying to find kids who otherwise look identical to each other and are just in the different environments. That way, it tries to get as much as possible at the idea of an experiment where you are only varying one thing and seeing how varying that one thing is then going to have an effect on the outcomes of interest. So that's the idea of this, this mixed effects model with matching. In terms of the qualitative methods, it's going to include coding and analysis of open-ended survey questions and focus groups transcripts. So as we said, we're going to run a survey. Part of that survey will have open-ended questions, so we'll create some survey frames to actually then code what do these open-ended responses, how would we categorize them, and also via that survey solicit people who might be interested in participating in focus groups to then collect people who we can dig in deeper, give a little bit more context, texture to the survey responses that we're getting. The surveys are going to be publicly available. We're thinking about weighting procedures to ensure that the responses are generalizable to the broader population. So we want as high of a response rate as possible, but we also want to make sure that if we're seeing lots of responses from particular schools or particular demographics of the population or our target population, how can we apply weights to then even out or make sure that the responses are more generalizable to what our general population, our target population looks like. And then, like I said, with focus groups, we're going to be randomly selecting them from survey respondents who identify an interest in providing feedback. High-level timeline, we've actually been working on this for a little while now. So in September is when we finalized our research plan. We're working on drafts of all of our survey instruments. This month, we've been testing and finalizing those survey instruments, so actually working with a survey methodologist from the American Institutes from Research. Also, Liz and Dr. Davis, Dr. Voigt have been providing direct feedback about other surveys we could be using, items we might need to be thinking about. So those survey instruments are close to being finalized. We're going to be doing some testing with individuals just to make sure items are really getting at the constructs we think they're getting at. By the end of the month, we're also targeting the completion of collecting all of the quantitative student outcome data that we're going to be using for our study. During November is when we're really going to be doing survey distribution and begin focus groups, ideally towards mid-November, with then wrapping up in December those focus groups, completing our quantitative analysis in December, which is then giving us in January to then really complete a final synthesis, putting all this information together, the qualitative, the quantitative, what's our overall interpretation, how are we answering these questions, and then providing that information to the board. And that's all we had related to this project.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it and look forward to it, and appreciate the thorough approach and reviewing the analysis. So thank you so much. And I'm going to finish up a couple of other announcements, but there may be, when we open up for questions from the board, there may be questions follow-up questions, either from our presentation from school nutrition and then also from our REA department as well. All right, just a couple of reminders. So one of the things we talked about for the last few meetings, we've been talking about our budget and our finances, and we're getting to the point of our November 5-year forecast. As I've shared before, as a district, we are required twice a year to produce a 5-year forecast, both in November of every year and also in May of every year, and that time is coming up. At our November 6th board meeting, we will be previewing what our 5-year forecast will be and voting on that later on that month. And one of the things we've been talking about and we shared in the last meeting, our Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Stockdale, shared, just really looking at this longitudinal look of our finances. And so on one end, you see the light gray line that is going up, which are expenses that go up over time, inflation, staff costs, all of those different things that are going up over time. And the blue line is our revenue that is coming in. And one of the things we talked about is based on our funding structure. The amount of dollars that we get in, one is based on enrollment, but also, as Chief Stockdale presented last time, even when there are increases in taxes, or as you guys know, the tax reappraisals and tax reevaluations that are taking place, even when that increases significantly, the amount that we can collect as a district has remained flat over time. And so there's work that we've been looking at in terms of the advocacy side, on the state side. Of course, there's work that we're doing to bring in more resources into the district. But then there's work that we have to do over time to really think about what is our future operating model to really close this gap. The orange line shows what the expenses will, or what our line would look like with a successful levy passage. And so that closes the gap, but it's not nearly closing the gap all the way. And so there's more work ahead. This is just an illustration of the things we've been talking about. And as we move into November, we'll be talking even more about not only the 5 forecast, but also the work that we're doing ahead to just continue to close the gap in our resources and provide financial sustainability for the district over time. Got to change it on here. And a final reminder, last month we talked about the relaunch of our Get More Opportunities, as we're calling it Get More Opportunities 2.0. Just a reminder that all schools receive funding this time, go around, and applications are open. They are live through November 8th. So if there are scholars, parents, staff members that are looking to participate in this program, the link is right here, but also I believe this can be found on our website and at the school, since this is now controlled specifically at the school where all schools have the dollars for the program. You can apply for an opportunity, and also schools support that process. The students are a part of that process as well as the staff. So just reminding everyone that applications are live through November 8th. And that concludes my report for you.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, and to our speakers. Are there any questions from board members? Ms. Lebron?
I don't necessarily have questions. I have some comments. I want to say thank you to the nutrition team for encouraging such a healthy lifestyles and a holistic approach to healthy lifestyles for kids, and introducing them to healthy foods early. Seeing those pictures of the little kids doing the science projects and really taking pride in the work that they're doing, and then, like you said, trying to sample the foods. I think that's really great. So kudos to the nutrition team for that work. And then with regards to student attendance and absenteeism, I wanted to say I'm pleased to hear that you're comparing outcomes and you're reviewing that along with the inputs, but I'm wondering how are we going to make that digestible for students? One, to celebrate them, which I know the district does really well, is celebrating the students that are in attendance, but to keep them motivated moving forward so that they know that showing up to school has a direct impact on their overall learning. So just thinking about ways to make that more digestible for students in the system so that they can be excited about continuing their attendance.
Excuse me, I had a question about the research study, if Dr. D'Amico and Dr. Voigt could come up. Or just Dr. D'Amico, whatever works. Thank you. I'm very pleased to see this, and look forward to the deeper dive on this data once you come back with it. I'm interested in, now I've lost the page, but give me a moment. Under the research plan, one of the factors you were looking at was achievement, and it makes all the sense in the world to look at state achievement data, state test achievement data. I'm wondering if there was any consideration of other achievement data to look at, college matriculation, grades, AP class passage rates, anything like that. If you considered it, why not include it? What might we look at it in another, outside of the framing of this study as well?
Yeah, the data certainly exists for us to look at it or to explore it as a possibility. The reason we focused in on state testing in particular is because we know that all students are guaranteed to take those assessments, whereas things like college matriculation, not all students are going to be going to college afterwards, not all students are taking the SAT, ACT, so it starts to create gaps in our data. So when we're already doing a matching and trying to find kids who otherwise look similar to each other, when we start to use data that has these holes, that then limits our sample and limits our ability to do the matching. So in order to make the best matches possible, it's why we were focused on just the Ohio State testing achievement assessments.
Yeah, that makes sense for the research study. I'm thinking, Dr. Morgan, if we think a little bit more about whether we do look at those areas, because if there is a gap because a school is not, having students testing on the ACT, that can tell us something as well, right? And I don't know that we could necessarily always attribute it to ours, but I just want us to kind of think through what else might be relevant.
That's a great point. I understand definitely from the controls of the study, but you bring up a great point, because actually just in my check-in with academics today, we were talking about this with our college and career measures, and a push that this board had is on how are we going to define college and career measures. So without going into too much, I know that our high school principals recently looked at their data, and it does vary across the board. We don't have currently, which we're moving in this direction, not all students are taking the ACT and or SAT. Not all students are qualifying for certain diplomas or certifications. And so these are areas that we're looking at because of those gaps that we're working on that's going to go in the core measures. And it may be even a side thing that we can look at, as I know most of our high schools are the schools with the differentiated calendar. I mean, we do have some K-8s, but there are a lot of high schools impacted.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
All right, next we will have public participation. During this segment of the board business meeting, we will hear all public comment on either agenda or non-agenda items. This public participation period will be for persons who previously submitted the request to speak form online to address the board for up to 3 minutes. If anyone wishing to address the board has any written material that they would like the board to review, please submit it to Mr. Bertzlaff over here to my left. He's raising his hand. And as usual, we will limit each speaker to 3 minutes. We ask that each speaker respect this time limit. First up, Polly Carr.
Hi, I'm Polly Carr. I'm a mom of twin fifth graders at Campus International School. I'm the president of our school parent organization, chair of the book fair, which is why we barely get here on time, and I also work for our after-school program, CIS Plus, which is amazing. I'm passionate about the Cleveland Plan, and last May I started a blog about things that I find out when I make public records requests. It's been illuminating, to say the least, and for a month now I've been wrestling with this question of a contract made with a consulting firm. And the contract is with a group called the Sister Accord. And when I received a copy of the contract, I saw that it was for $200,000, and it was signed last January when we fell off a financial cliff and we're talking about cutting kids' educational minutes, but we're making a contract for $200,000 with a group that does women's empowerment sessions for female CMSD administrators at the cost of $10,000 for each of the 20 participants. They meet for 1 hour twice a month. There's also additional contracts signed in July and August to provide empowerment programs to a selection of 19 girls from 9 different schools for $29,000, plus $18,000 for the books and workbooks that go with this program for 19 girls. Now, I searched through the board docs and also requested records on the board approval for this expensive and, to me, questionable contract. I couldn't get anything, so I contacted the board attorney, Mr. Bertzlaff, who told me that the CEO is empowered to make contracts like this without board approval. That seems to me to be a just recipe for so much corruption, and maybe this is perfectly legitimate, but it may not be in the future with a contract and this kind of power for $200,000 when we are in a spiral. Now, Eric Gordon also, during his tenure, there were contracts. They were for $1,800 and $4,700 with the Accord. It was not for administrators at, this is $200,000 for administrators. You already make enough money, and if you are not empowered, I don't know what more we can do for you. If the CEO were making a purchase of a $51,000 clothes dryer from a purchaser who's not already on an approved contract with the board list, he would have to seek approval. That's a tangible item. This is a contract from a company that we don't know anything about, and had I not come across them on LinkedIn and their presentation to the women's group, I would have never have looked into it because it's not on the board docs. There's no record of it. Nobody knows that the spending is going on. And you're asking me to vote to pay more money.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Stacy Steggert.
Hello, thank you to Dr. Morgan and the board. My wife Polly and I, we have 2 kids who are in CMSD schools and one who is in high school at a non-public. And I was so very excited to see Dr. D'Amico and Dr. Voigt speak this evening because it absolutely meets well with what I wanted to talk about. Last April, I voiced some concerns about the district's plan to eliminate all the extended day and extended year calendars in favor of a unified calendar that would have fewer instructional hours. And part of that, Dr. Morgan had made a comment that we just don't get much for those extra instructional hours. So I put together an analysis of data from the 2022 school year, shared it with the board, and that was the most current data available at the time. And after I shared those findings during the public comment, I was invited to speak with Dr. D'Amico. And that meeting was interesting and illuminating for a number of reasons. I asked him if he knew where Dr. Morgan might have gotten the idea that the extra instructional hours don't get us very much, and Dr. D'Amico said that that idea probably came from him. Part of that is relying on the state report card stars all by themselves, which is, I think, a pretty crude approximation of what's going on in a school district and should not be the sole basis for major policy decisions. Dr. D'Amico also said that he used that star rating system because he has to make the information digestible for Dr. Morgan and the board. I'm very encouraged after hearing the data discussion this evening because while I can appreciate that professionals in other fields talk about data differently than statisticians, I am standing here in front of a dais of people with advanced degrees, and I'm wondering why the data department doesn't think you can handle hearing more than talking about the state stars on the report card. There's more to it than that. But he also gave me some really good, helpful criticism that my R-squared values were a little low, and I'll talk about that another time, weren't very exciting, but I was super appreciative of that feedback because it was exactly the kick in the pants I needed to put together a larger data set, which I can't share all of because it's under consideration right now for publication or possible presentation. But I will say that I took 11 measures of academic success and 3 measures of school performance for the time period of 2015 through 2023, excluding that year we were out for COVID. And what I want to make it my mission this year to come back as often as I can and share that with you. But I want to leave you with the thought tonight that a student who goes to CIS, K-8, and Cleveland Science and Medicine, 4- and 5-star schools with extended calendars, will graduate having had almost 2 more years worth of instructional time compared with students who attend schools on the traditional calendar. And I wonder, do you really think so little of our educators that you believe 2 extra years of schooling with them doesn't make that much of a difference? Because I don't believe that. I think it makes a huge difference. And I'm very much looking forward to our data discussions this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Famika Bonner.
Grateful evening, board and Dr. Morgan. I am Ms. Bonner. I am an educator and a parent at Marion C. Seltzer. Hope to see you guys at the community meeting tomorrow for our new building information. I am here to talk about core values. The main ones is care and well-being, growth and learning, and student and community focus. As of right now, we had a lot of data about the absentees today, and 50% of our students are not getting to school. One of those reasons is probably because transportation, and we talked about this. I sent an email to Mr. Taylor and his crew October 21st, and it's still going on from ever since August. Something has to be done. The glitches you keep talking about back in August is still happening October 22nd. Like today, we had a bus who was late almost 4:30. Kids are not getting home to their parents, and it's a concern. So I need that glitch to be fixed. I understand that bus drivers retire, I get it, but we got to fix that problem because we're talking about the core values, right? Care about our children. The second thing, I'm so glad that we had nutrition department come in and talk about all the cool things that Marion C. Seltzer doesn't get, unfortunately. We don't have a vegetable bar. We don't get the cafeteria time that they're talking about. Must be nice that some schools get to have, they get to taste new things. We don't get that. We also, our children who are in preschool, they get 2 chicken tenders, and our 8th graders, who are about the size of you, Dr. Morgan, also get 2 chicken tenders. Something's got to happen. Once again, we're talking about the care and well-being of our students. Last but not least, our safety and security. We have a problem, and we need to fix it. We've had several students running our building. We have to close our doors. Something has to be done. And we've tried to get information. We tried to get help from dispatch. I called dispatch myself one day, and they told me, well, did the admin or did your safety and security do anything? And my problem is, first of all, let's communicate with the heart. Just like you guys want us to communicate with the heart, I want dispatch to communicate with the heart as well. So I just need everybody to work together because as of right now, our strategic priorities, safe and supportive culture, coherent central system, we need help. I need my network leader to come to our building and speak with us. Thank you guys so much. Before I leave, I wanted to give a shout out. I want to leave on a good note. My grandson goes to A.J. Rickoff. He has 2 great educators, Mrs. Sims and Miss Billingsleen. So thank you so much, guys, and have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Next, Denise Harris.
Good evening and welcome to John Adams. The last time I came before you, I asked if every school in the district could have the same grading scale. I didn't know at that time that it was already in the planning stage, so tonight I sincerely thank the board and the CTU for putting that plan into place. However, this evening I stand again before you regarding the same issue. Somehow this message was not clearly communicated that every school in the district is to follow the same grading scale. During our first marking period, we had what I called a quiet chaos in our building when it was time for us to input our grades. For various reasons, our staff was unsure what to do, what grades they were supposed to put in. This caused unnecessary stress and confusion in our staff, and it lowered our staff morale. My suggestion, to avoid any future confusion, I would like to respectfully request that an official copy of the new grading scale be sent to the CMSD email of every educator in every building in the district. I would further request that this official copy be sent with the explanation stating that this grading scale has been agreed to by this board and the Cleveland Teachers Union, and the grading scale is what every educator is supposed to be using. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Next, Andrea Dockery Murray.
evening. Good evening, Dr. Morgan, Chair Ellicott, and members of the board. My name is Andrea Dockery Murray. I am the visual art teacher here at John Adams College and Career Academy, along with being the travel advisor, as you know, and the chapter chairperson. So welcome to the home of the Mighty Rebels. Tonight, I want to talk about a couple of things. I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Florence yesterday, and one of the topics that came up was the levy. The topic of the levy is most concerning because this directly impacts our students, their families, the CMSD family, and the community. First, where's the visibility? Where's the advertising for the levy? Is it true that we were stripped of the opportunity because the Attorney General didn't think that there was going to be a fair balance of the pros for the levy versus the no's for the levy? Because if we are the yes and there's no one that's there for the no, why can't we just be big and bold and boast our yes so that we can have the community buy in? If no one is saying no, again, we need to be saying yes at the top of our lungs. Every school, all 30 high schools, all 64 K-8 schools, plus every piece of property that the district owns, the 12 schools that are closed, the 7 vacant lots, East and Woodland Data Center, they all need to have like 1,000 signs about the levy. If we don't pass this levy, the projected deficit of $125 million will not just cripple us, it will hemorrhage us to the point where we're going to be placed on life support. 700 people translates to 700 families, and that's a rough estimate. It's a projected estimate, correct? And the fear is it could go beyond that because it is just a projection, and we know that there's a margin of error with projections. So what do I need to do? Do I need to call my council person? You know, we had the 3-star rating, rah-rah, a few weeks ago. I was there. It was so wonderful. But when we came back to the building and I was stationed here and I was talking to parents, some of them didn't have any idea. They were clueless that there was a levy that's on the ballot this year. So if we want to keep our 3-star rating, if we want to increase that rating and go beyond the stars and not get knocked out in C stars, we have to do whatever we have to do to pass this levy. So as I close, I'm thankful that we had the visitors to talk about the year-round school calendar and the district calendar, so I can't wait to share more next month. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Dockery Murray. Next, Courtney Gargiulo. I apologize if I mispronounced.
That's okay. Hi, good evening, members of the board and Dr. Morgan. My name is Courtney Gargiulo, and I am an English teacher at Rhodes School of Environmental Studies. I am also a proud member of the Rhodes running program. I have coached at Rhodes for the past 11 years as the boys' head cross-country coach, as well as the former head track coach. And I am here today to advocate for developing a West Side track and field facility. So 3 weeks ago, CMSD and the City of Cleveland celebrated the groundbreaking for the new stadium at JFK High School, representing a significant investment from the district and city totaling $4 million. On August 20th, the board voted to allocate $763,000 to resurface Bump Taylor track. While I commend these efforts, they underscore a glaring inequality, and that is that there is not a single track on the entire west side of the city of Cleveland. In 2024 alone, a nearly $5 million new commitment has been made on top of investments to the track at Collinwood and Roy Kidd over the past 2 decades. The addition of a new JFK track will make 4 tracks on the east side, while students on the west side still lack access to any safe or suitable facility. In 2016, John Marshall's dirt track was removed and Rhodes track was filled with rocks. Training on uneven conditions increases the risk of injury and makes it completely inadequate for competition. Investments are long overdue. The last improvement to our track at Rhodes was a concrete pouring project by the Works Progress Administration through FDR's New Deal in 1938. That's just 2 years after Jesse Owens planted his Olympic oak at our school property for, to honor his training there. It has been 86 years. Despite the limitations, our running programs at Rhodes continue to achieve success. This year, under Coach Julian Jackson-Ross, we had D1 state qualifiers in both indoor and outdoor track, and I currently have a Division I regional qualifier for cross-country racing this Saturday. And with a properly renovated facility, we could attract, train, and transform more lives. Our runners joke that we run on rocks, and while the mantra is humorous, the disparity in investments in sports infrastructure between the east side and the west side is neither funny nor fair. All Cleveland kids deserve the chance to have a safe space to train and thrive. And Dr. Morgan, at the JFK groundbreaking, you referred to the new stadium as a symbol of our unwavering commitment to providing equitable opportunities for every student to thrive. So if those words hold true, I urge you and your leadership team to take steps to evaluate the track at Rhodes or any other suitable location to evaluate possible renovations. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista Cook. Krista Cook. Alicia Dodson.
Good evening.
Evening.
I am here as a CMSD graduate, a current CMSD paraprofessional. Most importantly, I am a grandparent of CMSD students as well as an advocate for our exceptional and our English language learners. What is your plan if this levy fails? How many of your highly skilled paid executives and leadership team will be returning to the classroom? Who will be standing in the gap after the layoff of over 700 teachers, all while we are still dealing with the teacher and paraprofessional shortage? Who will manage student behaviors in bloated classrooms? Who will be changing the diapers of some of the district's most exceptional children? Who will provide translation services for our English language learners? Aren't we all educators? Maybe Dr. Florence could come to a middle school class and teach HMH with fidelity and rigor. Maybe Dr. Mosley could bring his cooling massage chair, which cost the district, who is broke, a pretty penny. Maybe he could bring that to one of the unair-conditioned buildings to keep up the momentum and the prestigious 3 stars that the district just earned. After all, their careers and accomplishment in the classroom have clearly propelled them to these highly visible, highly paid positions. So who better to fill the openings created by layoffs? After all, aren't we all educators?
Thank you, Ms. Dodson. Next, Lynette Marsh. Lynette Marsh. Ryan Dent. Ryan Dent. All right, that concludes our period of public participation. Next, the board will consider the adoption of 8 resolutions in the areas of Board of Education, Finance, Academics, and Equity and Culture. The board discussed each of these resolutions at our October 8th work session. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 6.01, amending the professional services agreement between Julian and Grube and the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District for internal audit services.
So move. So move.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you. Both state law and board policy provide that the Board of Education may appoint an internal auditor who reports directly to the board. While in the past the board has employed an internal auditor, after considering hiring another full-time employee to serve as internal auditor, the board determined that contracting with a CPA firm for internal audit services is the most prudent and efficient way at this time to ensure that the necessary internal audit function is adequately and independently performed. At the June 25th board business meeting, the board approved a contract with Julian and Grube for internal audit services. This amendment today will allow additional support from Julian and Grube as needed and within the initial $75,000 contract. While the original contract provided for these services at the firm's partner hourly rate, the amendment will allow some of the internal audit function to be conducted by other employees at Julian and Grube at lower hourly rates as set forth in Exhibit A of the resolution. Is there any discussion from board members? Dr. Morgan, any additional comments? Hearing no further discussion, Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Ms. LeBrun? Yes. Motion passes with 4 votes.
Thank you. The resolution is adopted. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following 2 resolutions. 7.01, authorizing the acceptance of a grant from the state of Ohio and authorizing the chief executive officer to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grant. And 7.02, authorizing the acceptance of a grant from the George Gunn Foundation and authorizing the chief executive officer to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grant.
So move.
Thank you. These resolutions are our finance resolutions, which we discussed at the October 8th work session. Dr. Morgan, any further comment?
Yes. With Resolution 7.01, the board will be accepting a grant from the state of Ohio in the amount of $599,250 to support the assessment of children with a set of 25 skills, knowledge, and behaviors in the fall and spring, and enter ratings in the Ready for Kindergarten system, which that's the K-Ready system, and authorizing the CEO to spend the grant funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the gifts and grants. With Resolution 7.02, the board will be accepting the following grant from the George Gunn Foundation in the amount of $40,000 to support the entry fees and team expenses for East Tech, MC Squared STEM, John Marshall, Davis Aerospace and Maritime, Garrett Morgan School of Engineering and Innovation High Schools, and CMSD's all-girls team in the first robotics competition, and authorizing the CEO to spend the grant funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the grant.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Any discussion from board members? Mr. Stockdale, would you please call the roll on this motion?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Mrs. LeBrun? Yes. Motion passes with 4 votes.
Thank you. The 2 resolutions are adopted. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 8.01, adopting and issuing a report to the state of Ohio describing the Cleveland Municipal School District's performance for the 2023-24 school year. Thank you. This is an academic resolution which we discussed at our October 8th work session. Dr. Morgan, any further explanation?
Yes. Under the Cleveland Plan legislation enacted by the Ohio legislature in 2012, the CMSD Board of Education has previously, in 2012 and 2015, adopted an array of measures to be used in evaluating the performance of the school district and goals for improvement on each of those measures. Each year, our board is required to submit a report to the governor, the Ohio Director of Education and Workforce, and the General Assembly describing the school district's performance for the previous school year on each of these measures and whether the school district has met each of the goals for improvement. With this resolution, the board will be adopting and issuing this annual report for the 23-24 school year. The report is attached as Exhibit A. Upon adoption of this resolution by the board, this report will be submitted to those designated state officials by the November 1st deadline.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Any discussion from board members? Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Mrs. LeBrun? Yes. Motion passes with 4 votes.
Thank you. The resolution is adopted. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt the following resolutions. 9.01, authorizing the employment of teaching, non-teaching, and school-based administrative staff. 9.02, authorizing the reclassification of employees. 9.03, accepting the retirements, resignations, and other separations of employees. And 9.04, authorizing the issuance of limited contracts for differential positions and the payment of additional earned compensation to employees.
Second.
Thank you. These are our equity and talent resolutions, which we discussed at our October 8th meeting. Dr. Morgan, any additional explanation?
Yes, these are routine monthly talent and equity resolutions. Resolution 9.01 authorizes 95 new hires. 9.02 authorizes the reclassification of 35 employees. Resolution 9.03 accepts 48 separations of employees. And 9.04 authorizes limited contracts for differentials and payment of additional compensation to 243 employees. The further details of each of these resolutions are set forth in the attached Exhibit A attached to this resolution.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Any discussion from board members? Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Mrs. LeBrun? Yes. Motion passes with 4 votes.
Thank you. These resolutions are adopted. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? I do have some new business. Last week, I had the opportunity to represent the board and attend the Council of the Great City Schools annual fall conference. I found it incredibly illuminating. It was really great to learn from other boards. That has actually been one of the most impactful things I've been able to do outside of sitting on the board, is to connect with other districts, learn how they are doing things, talk through board processes and the successes that they've had, and as well as the challenges, and heard from districts like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charlotte on areas ranging from community engagement to something that our board will be engaging on here soon, the development of board goals and guardrails, and how different districts navigated that. Learned a lot about built environment, how it influences student and teacher outcomes from some of our other our colleagues across the country. And I also want to mention that a small group of our district staff was able to attend as well, including Dr. Morgan, who participated in a couple panels, including one on attendance and achievement, and our Candace Gross, who is here today, I think, who did a wonderful presentation on district branding and communications that was actually incredibly well attended. The room was like too full. I had to stand outside, but just want to give kudos to both of you and the team for preparing those presentations. And it's incredibly important that we not only do the work here in our district, but that we are learning from other people's best practices, connecting with other districts and understanding how they do things, what's tough, what's great, and also sharing our learnings with them as we all do our best to educate students across this country. So I wanted to share that with my fellow board members, and we'll continue to share more in our upcoming engagements on goals and guardrails. All right, the next board business meeting will be a board work session on Wednesday, November 6th at 6:30 p.m. at Arnold Pinckney East Professional Center. Please note that this meeting is on a Wednesday, not on our typical Tuesday schedule, because it will be the day after Election Day. It is our long-standing practice not to hold our meetings on Election Day to allow folks to get out and vote into the evening. The chair will now entertain a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment and employment of public employees and officials, preparing for negotiations with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment, and conferring with attorneys concerning disputes involving the Board of Education that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Stockdale, please call the roll.
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Yes. Mrs. LeBrun?
Yes.
Motion passed with 4 votes.
Thank you. The board will now move into executive session. Following that, the board will return to this room to briefly conduct some further business. The board is now back in public session. The chair will now entertain a motion to adopt a resolution approving a negotiated agreement between the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association and the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Dr. Morgan, any explanation on this resolution?
Yes, this resolution is to authorize the approval of a collective bargaining agreement with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association representing the school district's safety and security employees. The membership of the OPBA approved this agreement last week.
Thank you. Any discussion from board members? Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. LeBron?
Yes.
The motion passes with 4 votes.
Thank you. The resolution passes. As announced earlier, the next board meeting will be on Wednesday, November 6th. The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn this board business meeting.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Hearing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.